Nigeria's Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, says the government will be rolling out new taxes and excise duties as part of efforts to fund the proposed 8.8 trillion Naira 2019 budget. Taiwo Oyedele, partner and West Africa tax leader at PwC Nigeria, joins us now to discuss the funding options for Nigeria's government. Thank you so much, Taiwo, for joining us today.
Thank you.
So it's quite clear that there are serious concerns about whether or not the government will meet its oil revenue targets. But let's start with the non-oil revenues, because we know that this government has been trying to diversify its revenue mix. It's clear from the minister's statement that they're going to be quite, if you like, aggressive about non-oil revenue. What options do you think are on the table? Because many have spoken to us suggested that it's highly unlikely we'll see the government increase the corporate income tax rate. But could they touch the VAT rate and other tax rates? What's your expectation?
Yeah, so if you look at the components of government revenue, so for 2019 they're projecting about 7 trillion, 6.95 in revenue. So the components would be oil revenue, it would be taxes, and then it would be others.
Yeah.
So oil revenue, there's really not so much you can do about it. You don't control the price. Sometimes even production is subject to a number of factors, including OPEC cuts, like you just said. And I heard this morning that Nigeria is going to be producing maybe 1.7 million barrels per day for the first half of next year. So that would impact volume. If you look at the tax line, so you simply have companies' income tax, you have VAT, you have customs and excise, and all the other taxes combined are immaterial. Yeah. Then you look at the other income is independent sources like selling down JV interest to raise some money. Government is budgeting about 710 billion from that. You have recovery from loot and all of that. So in essence, when you're talking about raising Nigeria's revenue profile, it's not going to come from oil revenue. It's not going to come from independent sources because they are not sustainable sources. It's not. You don't pray to start recovering loot every year unless you plan to steal every year.
Sure.
So your focus is therefore on taxes. So let's look at it. Can we increase companies' income tax? It doesn't make sense. At 30%, we are one of the highest in the world, even of developed economies. Even the U.S., that for so many years didn't bother about tax rates, have now reduced them to somewhere around 15%.
For companies?
Yes, for companies. Look at individual taxes, around 20% for us. Not too bad compared to the rest of the world, but you have high unemployment rate. If you increase that, you create more problems than solutions. Look at VAT. Our rate is low 5%. Should you increase it? Should you not increase it? Think about who is paying those. There was an IMF report when we had the Nigerian Economic Summit in Abuja a couple of months ago saying that only 3% of taxpayers pay 97% of VAT income. So what that means is you have widespread non-compliance and evasion. If you increase the VAT rate, you make the good guys to be even less competitive and give them more incentive to no longer pay taxes. So if you think about raising money from revenue and you talk about tax, it is not introducing new taxes that will solve the problem. It's reforming the tax system from policy to legislation. And in terms of your focus has to be you don't tax production, you don't tax investment, you tax the top sector of the economy.
And of course, consumption.
Yes, exactly, in terms of consumption. And then in terms of income taxes, you focus more on the top 1% of society. Because in many countries, they tend to pay even more than the bottom 90%.
And I think that is perhaps what I think many people will be expecting. That top 1% that we know are quite wealthy in this country, and given the income disparity, it does appear that that should be the focus. We know that there have been some reforms over the last few years about taxing luxury items and so forth. I'm not sure if those have been very effective, but do you think that is still the way to go going into next year?
No, I don't think so. I think some of those things, we say luxury taxes, they're just things that I think government do for political purposes, just to create the sense that they're doing something. In terms of real impact, I haven't seen anywhere in the world where that would make, and it won't even move the needle. So focus on the income tax itself, personal income tax, get everybody who needs to pay, starting even with political leaders. It's sad that even the presidency and the National Assembly haven't remitted the PAYE of their staff for the past 5 years, according to the recent report by the Auditor General for the Federation. And in the electoral amendment bill that they're discussing now, they have removed the requirement for political parties to demand for tax clearance certificate as a precondition for vying for elective position. It doesn't make sense to me.
Doesn't send the right signal, obviously.
Absolutely. So what you need to do is to ensure that poorest people, most vulnerable, are exempted. So in Nigeria today, if you earn even 18,000 minimum wage, you still have to pay personal income taxes. If you start selling biscuits and guguru and ekpa, and you make 1,000 in 1 week, you have to file VAT returns.
Right.
That will not allow the economy to grow. We're making it difficult for people to do business.
But, okay, so let's take a very baseline view. It's, from all you've said, it's going to be very difficult for many of the reforms that appear to be proposed to be effective in terms of raising revenue. So what should we expect next year? Should that imply more borrowing by the government, or should that be a situation where we are going to see the government owing a lot more to people who are providing services, to the private sector, maybe things like subsidy payments and so forth? What do you anticipate is likely to happen next year?
I think in the short term, there's almost no option other than to borrow. And I see already in the 2019 proposals, government is going to borrow even more. The debt service cost in the 2019 proposed budget is 150% of federal government's non-oil revenue. So that's significant. Now, tax revenue is not a tap you just turn and it starts flowing. So we need to plan for it medium to long term. And in the short term, it's okay to borrow, but borrow for productive purposes. And government should stop hoping to spend money to fix everything from power to roads to rail. If you address policy issues, private sectors will take care of that. So you have less stress and pressure on your revenue.
So really, it's a year where the government has to be very precise in how it allocates its limited revenues.
Yes.
And as you've mentioned, try to get more investment from the private sector to fill the gaps that obviously the government cannot plug by itself.
Yes, correct. And then even you have MDAs who are not remitting their surpluses. Right. Those things should be addressed. So within the current framework, even with the challenges we're facing, if we do the right thing, focusing on how to plug leakages, reduce the cost of collection, stop taxing the wrong people, focus on the top percentage of the society, get government to lead by example, you would move the needle and get something that is sensible.
It seems quite clear to me that going into next year, the government's fiscal strategy is perhaps something we'll be talking about month on month. It will be interesting to see how things evolve. But thank you so much for sharing your perspective.
Indeed.
Today, Taiwo Oyedele, partner and West Africa tax leader at PwC.